Thanks. Yeah, I did. I was here this morning, so I figured I'd grab it while I was there. Still a lot of them left. No, there were boxes of them left, yeah.
Well, it's funny because I called and I said, can you just leave it here? And I said, what about, Shane and Emerson? And they're like, oh, theirs are already picked up. And I was like, oh, I felt like I was slacking.
And I don't even know why. I don't know what I'm going to do with all these posters.
Oh, we still have our party to do, so.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we had ours up. But I got 4 posters to hang. I mean, how many things I got to see as a kid? Yeah, it'd be nice though.
No, I didn't know if they would give it back. When they hung them, they were
I
so excited. And I
thought the same thing. I was wondering what would happen, but they were single.
It's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order. If you stand for the pledge to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First on the agenda is the oath for our new members and returning members. So if you'd like to step up to the flag. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Board of Education. Just want to sign. Okay, moving on to election of president. I open the floor for nominations for president of the Board of Education.
I nominate Jim Grant.
I'll second it.
Any other nominations? Okay, I close the nominations and recommendation is to nominate and elect James Grant for president of the Board of Education. Can I have a motion and a second?
Make the motion.
I'll second. Heather will second.
Give me 1 second. It's open for voting. Motion carried. Now I would like to have Mr. Grant come up to the flag. Raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of President of the Board of Education.
Now I will turn the meeting over to Mr. Grant.
Thank you, Mrs. Redmond. One second, please. Next on our agenda is election of the Vice President of the Board. If I may have nominations for Vice President, please.
I'd like to nominate Eric Polkowski.
We have a nomination for Mr. Polkowski. Are there any other nominations? At this point, we'll close nominations. May I have a motion to elect Mr. Polkowski as Vice President of the Board?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Mr. Kenlon.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Allen. Mrs. Redmond, if you could, thank you. The motion carried.
Here.
Thank you. We'll proceed with the reorganization meeting. Many of these items are consent items. Most of them are. Item 5, appointment of officers. Resolved that the Akron Central School Board of Education does hereby approve the board appointments. Consent 5A and 5B.
Moved.
Moved, Mr. Massey.
Second.
Second, Mrs. K.A. Questions or comments on the appointments of officers? that motion carried. I'll move on while Mrs. Redmond's finishing up. Next item is designations. Item B on the designations are representatives for the Erie County Association of School Boards. Akron has and hopes to continue to remain very active in the efforts of the ECASD. We need to agree as a body, the representatives and the alternates, in being the delegate.
I'm interested in delegate.
Okay, I've been the delegate in the past, and you can certainly be the delegate. I'm interested in being your alternate, if anyone else. So Mr. Allen is the delegate, and I am the alternate. We can talk before the first meeting on how that works.
Okay.
Okay. ECASB Legislative. Mrs. Pinjator, Mr. Polkowski. Mrs. Pinjator, are you all right if Eric's the delegate and you're an alternate?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. All right, ECASB Budget and Finance. Mr. Kenline?
I'll take that one.
Okay. Anyone interested in being the alternate? I'll be your alternate.
2 whole meetings.
I know.
What are
okay.
the, oh, you got,
One's in September, one's in October, one's in January.
Mrs. Redmond, do you have those? Okay. Public relations representatives. There are 3 very active committees, there are actually 2 very active committees, and the strategic planning committee. Anyone interested in being the Native American liaison?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Strategic planning?
I would also.
yes.
More the merrier.
All right, you're both welcome to participate.
For just so you're aware, for Native American, it's the 3rd Tuesday, or 3rd Thursday?
Deb said Wednesday.
Usually Wednesday.
Wednesday, I'm sorry.
I think it's a lot of times the same, like same day as work.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
It's 3 o'clock.
Okay.
Strategic planning, the lion's share of the work has been done. Members would be, of course, encouraged to now, we're kind of in the subgroup phase, to attend those meetings. Those are most likely to be at the end of the day, like 2:40. It's a lot of instructional planning with our staff. But then there'll also be meetings in the spring where we'll pull the entire group together. We will do the progress on our piece. And Mrs. Kirsten does a lot of that work.
Okay, rec.
I'd like to do that.
Mr. Massey? All right. Thanks, everyone. That brings us to the designations vote. May I have a motion for the slate of designations and to approve the other designations?
Make the motion.
Mr. Ryan makes the motion,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. K.A. Questions or comments on that motion and these items? Again, thank you everyone for your interest and your participation in advance. Motion carried. Next item is item 7. Authorizations. Our recommended action is that the Akron Central School Board of Education hereby approve the authorization items, consent 7A to 7J.
Moved.
Moved Mr. Massey.
Second.
Seconded Mr. Allen. Questions or comments on the authorizations? Motion carried. Item 8 is the District Committees on Special Education. Our recommended action is that the Akron Central School Board of Education hereby approves special education items consent 8A to 8C. Move, Mrs. Kay.
Second.
Second, Mr. Polkowski. Questions or comments on the special education items? Motion carried. Item 9, impartial hearing officers. Our recommended action is that the Akron Central School Board of Education hereby approve the hearing officer items consent 9A and 9B.
Move.
Move, Mr. Kenline.
Second.
Second, Mr. Allen. Questions or comments? Motion carried. Item 10, other items. Our recommended action is that the Akron Central School Board of Education approve all other actions, consent 10A to 10M.
Move.
Move, Mr. Massey.
Second.
Second, Mr. Polkowski. Questions or comments on those items?
On section B, is that a readoption of the code of conduct policies and the board policies?
The code of conduct for the school comes up separately. It
Okay.
is on the board policies.
Okay.
There will be an update to the code of conduct in August for the board to approve. There are not significant changes because we just made changes last year, but there are planning meetings with each building to review and make potential changes to the board's adoption.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Motion carried. That concludes the reorg portion of our meeting. I again like to thank Mrs. Redmond for 3 years ago realizing we could do all that by consent and I didn't have to read everything. Item 11, hearing of individuals and delegations. We have no pink cards, so we're going to move on to the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. Just a brief update tonight. You'll see in your note, our summer program has started off quite successfully. Our total participation numbers are 190 students, 24 staff, broken down by 114 elementary students, 30 middle school, approximately 30 middle school, and 46 high school students. We're looking forward to starting our summer music program as well. I know Mrs. Kristen, I want to thank you for your work with the music department in that effort. Just prior to the board started this evening's meeting, we were talking about some updates related to COVID, and I just want to make sure the board was fully aware that we are no longer required for the summer session to post information to the state portal or include it on our website, so we've ceased that practice as it's no longer required. And it's notable, thankfully, at this point in time, our school nurse has not reported any positive COVID cases amongst our student population. Thus far, we've had one staff member contract COVID, but our numbers right now are low. We hope that remains to be the case. We are no longer required to do the weekly testing of individuals. However, we want to continue to provide the opportunity for anyone that wishes to receive an over-the-counter COVID test, either an employee, a community member, or a student who made those readily available in our nurse's office. This information was provided to me through
really to everyone, through a memo, through New York State Department of Health. In that memo, they did indicate that the New York State Department of Health will be looking at potential guidance for the schools in the 22-23 school year, but that information will be released at a later date. But at this point in time, I'm not clear as to what to expect from the Department of Health. As you may recall, in previous summers, it's been late August, close to the start of the school year. We, quite frankly, had to scramble to analyze the information, make our internal planning, and get the communication out to our staff and our parents. So we'll stay tuned. Would also like to inform the board that we had a capital project meeting this past Thursday. In this particular meeting, we're focused on the athletic user group for their input. As the board will recall, the project under consideration will be addressing areas of our brick and mortar building, a variety of things needing to be addressed, transportation, and then the third part of that three-legged stool would be upgrades, potential upgrades to our athletic complex. So again, the purpose of the meeting was to focus solely on the athletic portion. The intent was to share with them our first draft, if you will, of a conceptual master plan for athletic fields for the Akron Central School District that could potentially serve to guide the district over a span of 15 to 20, even 30 years, knowing that in order to have a well-designed and implemented next step, you need to think long range. And we've received a lot of positive feedback from the user group for attempting to do that level of forethought, and our architects and our construction managers have said they've never worked with a district that's tried to think of a master plan first and then scale it back into potential phases. So we talked about the fiscal implications of a first phase and recognizing that there is a desire, we believe, within the community and also within the school board not to have any project that would provide an additional tax burden, but rather be able to use our capital reserves to address the local share. Talk to them about the difference between MCA's, maximum cost allowance, and things that are non-aidable, such as athletics, so they understand that in order to get aid on a project, there has to be an instructional aspect of it, and then you can include the incidentals, such as athletics. It was very illuminating for the group. They didn't know that. The stakeholders were wonderful in providing input on their years of experience coaching here. Some of them played here as student athletes themselves, and many in the group were residents and what they'd like to see for their school community. So from that conversation, which lasted approximately 2 hours, there was an additional dialogue among myself, Mr. Polkowski was there, Chris Stewart, our AD, and our project manager, about how they're going to take that input, they're going to cost out some of the potential recommendations that the committee had for us. They're also going to look at, quite honestly, the topography. And I've said this to the board, I want to reiterate, we have a beautiful campus on a beautiful escarpment with some undulations to the land. It's what's underneath those rolling hills, if you will, that have our construction engineers most concerned. We know that we are on an escarpment. We know that there is bedrock. We know that there are active, not wells, but springs rather, where water can come up, and you need to be mindful if you're going to start putting in anything on those sites of water management and associated costs. So there is a great deal of thought being put into not proposing any site work where so much money would be expended to address the topography that you'd only be able to do a very small footprint or impact on the field itself. Simply put, if you're diverting springs or moving bedrock, you're going to spend all your money there and have very little for the actual facility the kids would play on. So it's that balance between location and construction that was a big part of the conversation. So they're going to start to cost out some of these suggestions and give us a further update. Any questions on that before I move to the next topic, or Mr. Polkowski, anything you wanted to add?
No, the only thing that I would say is, yeah, I think everybody, including the design team, walked away with, a lot more input to work with. I think that there were a lot of conversations that helped drive, some possible changes to the first phase, looking at between costing and participation. That was really good. One of the other comments, just to kind of piggyback there in regards to that there was a lot of positive feedback about everything. It was also mentioned that what the participants appreciated was the fact that they were actually involved. That in previous capital projects, that they didn't feel that there was enough of a shareholders group and input was given. So that was said by more than one person, that they were really happy that they were there and felt like they were part of the action.
And to that point, we backed away from some of the early timetables we discussed because we want to make sure we're doing it right and being inclusive, having a lot of voice. So we'll continue to provide updates to the board and to the community. Right now, we're still in the conceptual design phase of the timing. Our next step is to then work with Maggie, one of our financial planners and advisors. Just an update on vacancies. We've got a number of vacancies we're still seeking to fill. There are 2 full-time elementary teaching positions. Interviews are this week, as well as a long-term sub, and the need for a lunch monitor. There has been a posting gone out for the FTE Native American counselor, homeschool counselor. We have a couple of applicants. We're not quite certain that the applicants that applied have necessarily the best credentials for the position, and we had a conversation with some of our current Native American counselors, and we're looking at perhaps posting again just to cast a wider net and see if we can get more applicants. We're not just going to hire whomever applied. We really want the best fit for our district. The high school position was filled at our last meeting. There is a recommendation on this evening's agenda for an FTE speech teacher, and for the creation of a full-time speech teacher, and I can address that now with the board. You may be aware that in our budget, we included a 0.5 speech teacher to service the needs of the kids. Since the period of time from the budget being adopted, working with Mr. Dunham, additional move-ins to the district, as well as the need for early intervening speech services at the primary level, there is now a need for that position to become a full-time position. Someone's giving me the nod of agreement over there. Talk to Mr. Dunham about funding of this position, and we know that half the position is currently included in our regular budget. He's able to use the 611 and 619 funds, grant funds, for the second half of the position. So we're fine with the position from a fiscal standpoint, as well as we can certainly substantiate the need. We have a need for a short-term school psychologist. You may recall we had a tremendously difficult time. We hired an outstanding school psychologist. We had a difficult time filling that position because there's not a lot of candidates. Likewise, we're struggling to find a sub for one of our psychologists that will be out temporarily. The senior clerk typist for technology has been posted. We're canvassing the list. And then some of the professional support staff positions, as the board is well aware, have been very difficult to fill over the last several years. We need 2 custodians, we need a mechanic, 2 bus drivers, and 2 food service helpers. So those positions remain open. It's our goal to try to get all these positions wrapped up by the August 17th board meeting. Few final things to share with the board. I thought it was important to throw this on the agenda, quite frankly, because Alyssa's Law received a lot of attention in the media. If you're not familiar, Alyssa's Law was signed by Governor Hochul, and it urges school districts to install silent panic alarms in schools that directly alert authorities to emergency situations. given the tragedies that have happened across the nation, that only makes sense. The good news is ACS has had such an alarm for a number of years. We've included it in a previous capital project. So here at Akron, there are silent alarms in the offices. When the alarm is pushed, all of the magnetic door holders close immediately. Simultaneously, law enforcement is notified. All of our security doors lock, and these blue strobe lights are alerted. So that technology is up and active here in Akron. So although the law doesn't require, it encourages. I just want to let you know that we have that system in place. Tomorrow and Friday, I'm at an all-day conference here on campus. It's a regional conference for emergency responders with a focus on school safety. So crisis management for school districts. And it will be hosted by law enforcement, fire rescue. Really looking forward to it. It was created by the conference itself was endorsed by Homeland Security. I'm not really sure who's doing and presenting. We'll find out, but many of our administrative team will be in attendance, as well as our year one policy safety risk management. The following week, we're going to debrief as a district-based safety team to talk about an evaluation of our best practice, our current practices, and potential recommendations. We've got a number of things in play right now. You may recall, toward the close of the school year, I met with local emergency responders on our evacuation plans, as well as our emergency response, parent reunification plans. Then we did a survey of the staff for their input, like as many eyes as they can in our community. And now we have this regional training. So we're trying to galvanize all of that information into a cohesive plan. We do have our district state plan and our building state plans, but we're constantly trying to gather more information, evaluate that information, and revise and update our plan. So while the board may adopt a plan, I want you to know that's a living, active process to refine it, but also to more importantly talk about implementation. It's fine to write something and have it on the books and have it on the shelf. You've got to be doing these ongoing dialogues about application. Finally, I know that this evening's reorg meeting, the board adopted the board meeting dates for the upcoming year. That said, there is a need for an additional board meeting in August. One of the things we are required to do once Mrs. Treader receives the tax information from the various towns, the board has to adopt the tax warrant and submit it. Our deadline for submission is August 10th, so I am recommending and requesting that the board consider an August 3rd meeting for the purpose of adopting the tax warrant. And it would be up to the board if that's the best date, as long as it's before August 9th, between August 1 and August 9th, any day in that window, and the time is up to the board as well. So I would just open that up to the board's contemplation, but we do need to have a meeting between August 1 and August 9th.
How does that date work? I know Mr. Massey has conflict anytime that week.
Fine.
Fine? Okay, let's do the 3rd of August then. It'll be it may or may not be a short agenda right now. We're just planning on that tax assessment approval, but if there's other things to come before the board.
Is there a time that the board would prefer?
I would prefer 7 o'clock and stick to that, if that's fine. Okay.
Thank you. That's all I have. Unless there's any questions.
Mr. McKay, just have a quick question on Melissa's law there. I know that we run shelter in place, lockdown drills and so on. You mentioned the blue strobe lights, and do those systems get tested as part of that whole, so the kids aren't going to be shocked one day or they're going to know what to do when those lights go off?
Yeah, when we do the fire drills and the lockdown drills, I'm not a big fan of particularly the early drills, not using those as teaching and learning opportunities. So I have told the building principals, when we do our first couple of drills a week. Make sure you tell the kids in advance, we're having a fire drill today. This is what it's gonna look like, this is what it's gonna sound like. We're having a lockdown drill. Should it happen while you're in one of the band rooms or here in the cafeteria where you will not hear, or the gymnasium, where you will not hear, they won't hear it. The acoustics in those rooms, you've got kids running around doing athletic meeting, that the blue strobes mean we're shelter in place. So there is instruction provided. Later, though, they are unannounced, and that's where we really test our students, our staff, and our administrative team's ability to respond. So we try to keep the unannounced top secret. And that's our true evaluation. We walk around with clipboards and we collect data on, is the door locked, are the kids out of sight, and so on. And then if we have an occasion where there's a room where the kids are visible or the door wasn't locked, we immediately follow up with that teacher so that they are aware.
Thank you.
We've also implemented the practice of keeping the doors locked at all times, so all I have to do is close them.
One question on the crisis management training that starts tomorrow. Did you say that our local emergency management team will be there as well?
Yep. Police, fire, Dan Qualic, our town emergency responder, most of our administrative team.
Okay, great. Anything else for Mr. McCabe at this point? All right. Item 13 is minutes. Our recommended action is that the Akron Central School Board of Education accept the minutes of the June 22nd, 22 regular business meeting as submitted by District Clerk Roxanne Revin. Move, Mrs. K.A.
Second.
Seconded, Mr. Polkowski. Questions or comments on those minutes? Motion carried. Item 14, personnel instructional. Our recommended action is that the Akron Central School Board of Education, upon the recommendation of Patrick D. McCabe, Superintendent of Schools, is hereby approved the following instructional items, consent 15A to 15E.
Moved.
Move, Mr. Massey.
Second.
Second, Mrs. K.A. Questions or comments?
Real quick, Mr. McCabe, are you planning on adding to this list of substitutes as needed?
Yeah, so Mrs. Kirsten does a really nice job of, we're constantly trying to advertise applicants to come, and then, Mrs. Kirsten, do you do it on as every time they apply, or it seems like once a week? But
Monitor the list closely for us and help me with that, and as soon as we have applicants, we try to get them scheduled within the next week or so, come in for an interview.
Motion carried. Item 15, instructional appointment. This is an individual motion. Jennifer Vespa, our speech pathologist. Our recommended action is that the Akron Central School Board of Education, upon the recommendation of Patrick D. McCabe, Superintendent of Schools, hereby appoints Jennifer Vespa, who holds professional certification in the speech and language disability area, to a probationary position in the speech pathology tenure area for a probationary period commencing on September 1st, 2022 and expiring on August 31st, 2026, unless extended in accordance with the law. This expiration date is tentative and conditional only. Salary for the school year 2022-2023 will be in accordance with the district AFA collective bargaining agreement based on Schedule 2, Step 2.
Moved.
Moved, Mr. Massey.
Second.
Seconded, Mr. Allen. Questions or comments? Motion carried. Item 16, personnel non-instructional. Our recommended action is that the Akron Central School Board of Education, upon the recommendation of Patrick D. McCabe, Superintendent of Schools, is hereby approved the following non-instructional items, consent 17A to 17G.
Move.
Moved, Mr. Massey.
Second.
Second, Mrs. K.A. Questions or comments? Motion carried with one trustee abstaining. Item 17, district items. Our recommended actions at the Akron Central School Board of Education, upon the recommendation of Patrick D. McCabe, Superintendent of Schools, is hereby approved the following district items, consent 18A to 18E. Excuse me.
Move.
Moved, Mr. Kenline.
Second.
Second, Mr. Polkowski. Questions or comments on these items? Motion carried. Item 18, special education. Our recommendation is that the Akron Central School Board of Education approve the classifications and placements as per the list received as recommended by the Committee on Preschool Special Education and the Committee on Special Education. These recommendations are for the least restricted environment at this time.
Move.
Moved, Mrs. K.A.
Second.
Second, Mr. Kenline. Questions or comments? Motion carried. Item 19, school board correspondence. Wednesday, August 3rd is the Western New York Law Conference at Salvatore's from 8 to 3:30 p.m. I believe we have a number of people attending. Mrs. K.A., Mr. Polkowski,
And then
Mrs. Pinjator.
from the district will be myself, Mrs. Kirsten, Mr. Dimitrov, and I believe Mr. Dunham.
That's great representation.
Yeah.
It really is. And thank you to the board members who are attending. Hopefully we can get an update since we're meeting that evening. Thursday, August 25th, ECASB Back to School Dinner. See Mrs. Redmond for registration by August 10th. Upcoming dates, we're scheduled for Wednesday, August 17th for a regular business meeting, and we've added August 3rd, both at 7 o'clock here in the cafeteria. Executive session, we do have a need to go into executive session this evening to discuss the employment history of a particular person. If I could have a motion, please.
Motion.
Moved by Mr. Allen,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Pinjator. Questions or comments?
Sorry.
Motion carried. We're in executive session at 7:43. We do not intend to conduct regular business after the executive session. Thank you everyone for attending.